Thank you for joining the Octavia Flynn Public Library for our Authors Festival. This year, our theme is visual storytelling. Our next guest is Brandi Sea Heft-Kniffin. Brandi is an award-winning creative director, design and brand strategist, and passionate observer. She uses her 20 years of experience to help fellow creatives map out a plan to discover uncommon inspiration so they can produce more meaningful work. Brandi believes that every designer deserves to have a process that will get them past creative block. Her presentation today is Bridging the Gap Between Strategy and Creative Voice. Without further ado, allow me to introduce Brandi.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And we will get started. All right, and let me just double check, make sure you can see this. We're on the right screen and everything?
Yes, we are all good.
Awesome, okay. So good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you made it today. I'd like to start with just a small exercise. So I hope you are prepared to take notes. I hope you're prepared to take notes anyways for today's presentation. But let's just start with a little brain warmer-upper. So I'm going to give you a few words, and I'd like you to write down the words and one or two words that you think of when I show them to you. So we're going to start with the word inspiration. So it'll just be a quick exercise. Just count to like 5 in your head and write down one or two words that come to mind. Next is creative voice. And lastly is going to be strategy. So I'll just leave you with that for just a couple of seconds. All right, so today we're going to be talking about bridging the gap between inspiration and creative voice. So what is that bridge? It is strategy. More specifically, because I am a designer, we're going to be talking about design strategy. So think about those words that you wrote down and think about, do they feel related? Do they feel disconnected? Were you wondering why on earth we're doing this? Well, this morning I'd like to share with you how strategy is actually the key to bridge that gaping hole that always seems to exist between inspiration and your creative voice. So as designers, as creatives, it is our job to be creative on demand. We're expected to always have endless ideas. But where does inspiration come from? Where do we get all these creative thoughts and ideas? I'd like you to meet Lucas. Lucas is one of my favorite characters from the movie Empire Records. It's a 90s sort of coming of age film, and he's basically like a 90s beatnik rocker who gambled away a bunch of money in an effort to save the place where he works from being sold. When he was found out and asked what he was thinking, this is what he said. Who knows where thoughts come from? They just appear. Have you ever felt like this? Because I know I have at times in my life. Like, you just can't control your ideas. You can't control your creativity. The ideas just appear when you least expect them, but they never seem to want to come when you actually need them. But they have to come from somewhere, right? Do they come from other designers? Do we all have a personal muse? Do they come from the internet, perhaps? So a lot of creatives and designers often say this to me: I just can't guarantee I'll always have ideas. So can you plan inspiration? What if I told you that you could, and that you could unlock it when you actually need it most, that you just need a plan and a way to do that? Plan, you say? So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but as Buffy said once, gotta have a plan, really? I just can't be proactive with pep? I think a lot of times designers and creatives think that if we're just proactive, like if we just have energy and optimism, that like the ideas are going to happen. But you really need a plan, because ultimately a hamster running on a wheel is pretty proactive. He's running, he's going, but he never really gets anywhere. So you need a plan, and strategy is how you make that plan. I'm Brandi Sea, and I've been a designer for almost 2 decades. I've been a design educator, podcaster, creative guide, and coach. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Just kidding. We're not done. Nowhere near done. So, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. And maybe you say you get planning, but you can't plan if you'll have inspiration or good ideas, right? I always plan on having ideas, but they don't come if I'm not inspired. So how do you plan ideas? The word is strategy, not strategery, strategy. I know that it really doesn't seem related to inspiration. They kind of seem like opposites. Strategy is very left brain, and inspiration is theoretically very right brain. But let me back up. So I introduced this talk by saying that design strategy is the bridge, right? Between those words I gave you and the ideas that we want. So say we have inspiration on one side and creative voice on the other. And then we have this guy. This is the gaping hole keeping them apart, the thing that is always in our way. Strategy is the one thing that can truly connect inspiration to your creative voice as a designer, as a creative person. It's what you need to bring them together so you actually have a way to come up with ideas when you need them. Design strategy is the plan. It's the steps on the right path to get you from where you want to start on a project to the day you finish it. There are theoretically a lot of ways, right, to go from any point A to any point B, but you know what they say, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Strategy is that straight line to your own epic finish. A great design, just like a great story, has a point A and a point B and a series of steps to get from one to the other. And again, you're going to hear me say this word a lot. Strategy is the straightest path to your epic finish. It gives you the opportunity to have a lot of things. You'll have unique concepts. You'll have clarity and direction on what you're trying to achieve. You will almost never have creative block. You'll save so much time. You'll have a lot more respect and credibility among your peers and your clients. And ultimately, you will have creative confidence because you will be able to fight that imposter syndrome with, I have this process, I have a plan, I know what I'm doing, and I know how to have the ability to get my ideas when I really need them. So, all right, so maybe you're buying in a little bit to this whole idea and you see why it's good, but how does this strategy actually work? What does it look like? Here's how I do it. This is the strategic process. It's the plan and the strategy behind the scenes of every design I create, every blog post I write, everything that I create, every design story I tell involves asking why, understanding your goals, who you're designing for, the problem to solve. It also gives, and this is the really important part, a literal roadmap to follow to achieve a visual concept, a creative, overarching, guiding concept. So I'm not going to go through every step, but I wanted to call out just a couple key pieces that this process uses to build the bridge from inspiration to your creative voice. First is the word map. So the word map starts with words. And research. So we're going to talk just a little bit more about what these all entail in regards to a design process and strategy. So let's talk about the word map first. A word map is something probably everyone is fairly familiar with. It's also been called a web, a mind map. I call it a word map for a reason. The word map is not just a web of connecting things. It's not just another brainstorm technique. While it can be those things, it's not a map of whatever's just on your mind at the moment. This is not your English teacher's mind map for writing freely. This word map method actually uses a strategic grouping of words that connect with the goal of finding specific things. A concept, your visual elements that you need, and colors. And since there's presumably a lot of writers in here, this word map also achieves the goal of finding similar things for any story you would be writing. To help solve the what do I design or what do I write dilemma, the word map is the key. This is what one of my average word maps looks like. Pretty crazy. But basically what it helps find is, so this is my meta word map about word maps, in case you were curious. Visual elements helps you connect your uncommon inspiration, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, the direction, but more than anything, this little yellow guy here in the middle off to the left, it gives you a place to start. And that is really something that creatives find very difficult when you think you have to start with ideas. Starting with words allows you to have something to put on the paper. So after the word map is research. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Most people would say, all right, Brandi, I know how to research. Why are we talking about this? How does it help me connect inspiration? And even more so, how does this help me find my own creative voice? I already know how to make a mood board. I know how to search Pinterest and Behance for inspiration. Where is my creative voice involved in research? So what if I told you there are research methods besides your favorite one, besides all of those things I already mentioned? The right kind of research is where you're going to be able to discover your own inspiration, and in that, your creative voice. So when you're strategic about where you research, your ideas are actually going to be a mix of the things you've internalized that are unique to you. Books, design books, comic books, coffee table books, travel books, art books, or art in real life, painting, sculpture, murals, anything like that, photography, historic eras, graffiti even, TV shows, movies, plays, album covers, fashion. I could literally go on forever. Your own photos can also be part of your own research for inspiration. The key is that you try to get offline. You try to dig deeper into your research instead of very surface level in areas that other people are already creating, and looking at things that inspire you specifically. What are things that you love? What's on your bookshelf? What kind of things do you collect? Doing research differently is the best way to access your uncommon inspiration, to find those things that no one else will, that is going to reflect you. Never underestimate where your seemingly different passions and interests might meet to create something that is unmistakably you. Okay, so now you maybe get the idea of the word map and researching and finding things that inspire you, but you still aren't grasping how maybe does this help me find my creative voice? It still seems a little disconnected. So remember this process. If you look closely, you're going to see this little yellow line. That is your inspiration. The reason it is around the entire process is because it should be weaving in and out of the process. Inspiration and your creative voice should not only come at the moment of I need a design idea, or I need a writing idea. The inspiration, your creative inspiration, acts like the grease in the wheels of the process. It's what keeps the process moving. So when you use the right plan, when you have strategy, your own voice will come out naturally because you've been infusing it all along at every stage from the very beginning. From the moment you start with words, doing that word map, those are your words. Those are the words that came out of your brain. And maybe you need some help from the thesaurus, but ultimately, those words came from you. Your concepting, what you decide to pull out of that word map, all of that came from you and you alone. So from the moment you start to the last time you save and your design or your book or your blog post, whatever you're creating is finally finished, your own inspiration has been weaved throughout because you have a strategy and you have a plan. Your inspiration is uncommon. Why? Because you are. No other single person has your insight, your words, your eye for beauty. Uncommon inspiration looks like 20 people being in the same room with all of the same objects to look at, but every single person finding something different that is interesting or inspiring about those same items in that room. Uncommon inspiration, for example, here's some of mine, is looking at this through my car window. Don't worry, I wasn't driving. And seeing this. I painted this on my iPad. It is basically the idea that I had when I saw this pretty average picture through my car window. Uncommon inspiration can also look like spilling your ink from a paint pen, looking at it and thinking, oh, that looks like kind of like a tracked path on Google Maps. What could I do with that? Saving it, doing the work of following this strategy and the plan, and being able to use it later to create this book cover for A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway, which, by the way, is one of my all-time favorite books. It looks like taking steps back everywhere you are and looking at the big picture or up close at the details and asking, why am I drawn to this and what could I do with it? Sometimes you'll have a way to use it, and many times you just capture it and you tuck it away into your personal library of inspiration, into what I like to call your little pocket full of ideas that you can come back to later. Uncommon inspiration really just looks like being a constant observer and absorber and being aware of your surroundings and your environment at all times. These are some of mine. So the first one you saw is one of the shade covers here at the biopark, going into the reptile exhibit, I guess, and you just look up and it is all of these really brilliant colors. This one on top here is a piece of a shirt that I thought was very interesting with the black and white and the polka dots, which, as you can see, I really love polka dots. This here is the Conciergerie in Paris, and to me, when I took a picture of it, it really looked like ice cream cones upside down, and so I took it into my iPad and I made that come to life. And this is obviously the Golden Gate Bridge. I am a huge, huge fan of San Francisco, and when I see the world around me, sometimes this is what it looks like, and I wanted to put that into something I could use. I haven't used it yet, but maybe we'll use it for something eventually. So your creative work is really the outcome of who you are. Your point of view, your perspective, your experiences, your interests, your ideas. It develops from you knowing and having a plan, taking the steps and following the process, the design strategy. Your creative voice is really going to come through a strategic journey through this process. There is a lot of creative power in you to tell stories, whether that's with design or words. You can tell stories with purpose and then use design to communicate. It shows up as the ideas that you form that are really a mixture of how you see the world, finding research, inspiration, and bringing them together to really solve those problems in ways that only you can. It connects through strategy. So strategy is the bridge. And like a bridge, it is strong and steady and easy to walk on. You don't have to think about it. There will no longer be a gaping hole that holds you back, because even if it's there, you'll just walk right over that bridge and not think about it anymore. That little guy is not a hindrance anymore. It's just something you walk past. Strategy is the bridge. It is the best way to find your creative voice, whether you are writing, designing, painting, or any other creative pursuit. It's really having a process that connects your voice and your inspiration. And strategy is that bridge. You just have to trust it enough to use it. Trust the process, folks, and it will never let you down. So I'd love to connect with you. You can find my podcast, Design Speaks, everywhere you find podcasts. You can also connect with me online on my website at brandisea.com. I have tons of resources, hundreds of blog posts, podcast episodes, YouTube videos. I have my new course, which I'll tell you about in just a second. You can book a coaching session or just check out my portfolio. The Strategic Process Essentials course I have open is open until May 31st. You can find that at brandisea.com/courses. If you're interested, you can let me know. And now I believe that it is time for questions. So I appreciate you being here. I hope everyone's doing great. I would love to hear your questions if you have any.
Okay. Give me just a moment. All right. We'll start off with a first question from one of our staff members. How do you deal with when an idea that you're working with, the execution seems to kind of fall short of your initial vision and inspiration? What kind of revision strategies, or what do you use to kind of work on an idea once you've started it?
So sorry. So the question is, what do I do when my vision isn't coming out right? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So this is actually probably, I feel like, the easiest part, because if you've gone to a point of even making something, I think maybe what I would probably do is look back at the concept, look back at the visuals and the problem that I'm trying to solve, and maybe try and backtrack a little bit and try and figure out where I went wrong in this process. So did I decide that my concept was going to involve these kinds of photographs, and instead I went the route of doing illustrations, and maybe that's why this isn't working. Maybe I need to go back to the photograph line. If it's maybe the plan said I should use a sans serif typeface, and somewhere along the way I started using serif typefaces and it's just not feeling right. Well, that's probably why, because I'm not using the things that I decided were going to help me achieve this goal. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with going back to the drawing board, as long as, in my opinion, you don't start from scratch. You can go back to the concept and maybe find a better way of communicating that same concept, but trying to come up with a completely different concept sort of defeats the purpose and just makes you feel defeated.
All right. So we have another question from one of our staff members, that planning sometimes feels like it takes too much effort. Is there a fun way to kind of trick a person to plan, especially if this person has a spontaneous personality?
Yeah, so honestly, the word map is the plan, is the way to plan. And because it is such a visceral, hands-on, engaging your left and your right brain pieces together, that is like the best way to start. And no matter what kind of designers, no matter what kind of creatives I've worked with, once they understand how to really harness this method, you use the word map, and then that helps create your plan. And so then it's not like you start with the plan. You start with something that you're actually already creating. So it kind of gives you this endorphin rush of like, oh, I'm already creating something, like I can do this. And then the plan comes after that.
And this is my question. How do you go about kind of documenting that pocket of ideas, those pockets of inspiration that you were talking about? Do you have a favorite way to document some of those things? As a librarian, that's something that really interests me, how people track their ideas and such.
Absolutely. So my three primary ways, depending on so a lot of how I capture inspiration is visual, because I am a visual person, but I like to say that I write like a designer and I design like a writer because I also love to write. So my primary thing is my camera, like just my camera phone, because it's always accessible. It's so easy. I have probably 100 folders on my phone. So if I'm capturing colors, I have a whole red folder. I have shadows, I have textures, I have shapes, like whatever it is, I have that in a folder. I also, if there's something specific about maybe that photo, I then bring it into Evernote. Evernote's my favorite notes app that I keep everything. I can annotate, I can add voice memos to it, like all of the things can be there. I've been using Evernote since 2015, so I've got a lot of stuff in there. But and just notes, like notes is like the super lazy quick way to do it. Like if I don't have anything else, I can do that, you know, from the Bluetooth in my car. If I just have an idea or I see something interesting, I just always want to make sure that I'm capturing those things so that if I have a project later that maybe will incorporate something. I just recently have been working on a podcast cover design and was looking back through my photos to find some of my own inspiration, and found some stuff from our tech house that was here a while back. It's some really interesting lighting and stuff. And so then I can take that and bring that inspiration into my iPad and draw over it or sketch it or do whatever I want with it. And I haven't looked online for any of that inspiration. I haven't looked at anyone else's work. It's been things that I have personally found, and that's how this whole thing really, really works.
I have a few more questions.
Sure.
What are your favorite apps to use when you are creating? I know you mentioned that you do some iPad work and things like that. Do you have any particular creative apps that you find most useful?
Yeah, so I use a bunch. Obviously, I use, or maybe not obviously, I use the Adobe Creative Suite for basically everything. There's also so I also use Procreate. So for iPad apps, I use Procreate and Adobe Fresco, which is basically the Adobe version of Procreate. They both have sort of pros and cons, different usability. I like them both for different reasons. I love to use Adobe Spark Post to create just like social media graphics and bring in some of my inspiration for color palettes and things like that. Those are probably the ones I use the most. Obviously Illustrator and InDesign and like all the basic Photoshop type stuff. But outside of that, I do a lot of things on my iPad and on my phone for like actually creating things.
Okay. Our next question is, what made you interested in going into the creative field?
Oh man, so this is a fun story. I've yet to meet another person in the world so far. I guarantee you I'm not the only one that has wanted to be a graphic designer since they were 10 years old. So my father is a custom home builder in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he also does custom remodels. And he was just happened to be remodeling a office building in downtown Santa Fe, and it was take your daughter to work day. And we were he was showing me around the place, and upstairs from where he was remodeling was this other business. And so they all knew him, and he was just showing me around, and they were making business cards. I did not know at the time that they were a graphic design studio that actually also printed. This was like, I don't know, 1991. So it was a lot, like it looked very different than it does now. So I thought I wanted to be a business card maker. Like that's what I called it. I thought that that's what it just was so fascinating to me what they were doing. And I have never wanted to be anything else. I eventually realized this profession was graphic design and started learning the Adobe programs when I was in high school. Did my basics in 99 and 2000 and started designing like 2001, and went to college for it, got my bachelor's in graphic design, and it's literally, I have a friend that says I bleed design. It is just everything that I love. And I also, like, I would have probably been an English major in college, except I found out that people that teach English don't make money, and this was sounded like more fun. So now with my process and how I work, I get to incorporate all the words and all the things and also design. So that's like the really short version of my design journey to being a creative professional.
Would you have any advice for anyone who's maybe currently not working in a creative profession who just wants to like maybe tap into their creativity more or find outlets for themselves? Do you have anything you would recommend for them?
Yeah. Well, I'm just always going to tell people to use a word map because first of all, it is like the absolute best way to like find the essence of a thing. Um, but also try things. Like if you just want to do something creative, I 150% believe that every single human on the planet is designed to be creative, and that's why we all want it. We may not know what that looks like. So if you don't know what you want to do, try lots of things. There's so much free education online for any number of things that you want to try, whether it's sketching or painting or, honestly, I think you can find creativity in any kind of job. You could be a creative mechanic and, it's not just artists. And I really shy away from people saying that like I'm an artist or I do art because it just has this woo woo about it, and then people start to feel like, oh, I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't make that. I'm not a creative person. But I think that, and I know that every single person has creativity inside them. You just kind of gotta try things out and see what interests you. Try lots of things. I guarantee you'll find something that really lights you up. And even if you don't do it for a career, um, that's not even the point. It's just a really huge blessing that I get to create for a living. But it's also a curse, right? Like I talked about in the presentation, we're expected to be creative on demand. And so that is why I'm here, because it's a hard job.
Yes, definitely. Um, do you have a favorite project that you've worked on, whether personal or otherwise, that like the that like brought you to this process that you've presented to us? Like, do you have a did you have like an aha moment of like when this sort of strategy came into place for you, and was it tied to any specific project that you were working on?
Yeah, it was not tied to a project. How this process sort of came about, what has been a very, it has evolved quite a bit. So when I was in college, I had instructors that were very intense and were always asking me why. And now I am that person. But it sort of sent me in the direction of, okay, I need to have a reason for every single thing that I do. I can't, I always say like a real designer never just says, I chose it because it felt right, because nobody cares about your feelings. Like it doesn't matter if it feels right. Does it solve a problem? Does it communicate a message? So that was sort of the start of it. I was taught very early to sketch your ideas first. When I was in college, I feel so old now. It wasn't super easy to just take your idea onto the computer and just do what you wanted. You needed to have a sketch, and you needed to have a better sketch of your rough sketch, and then you could start to make something. So I learned that process. Then after I was a creative director over an in-house design team, I started to implement a lot of these points in this strategic process as more of a checks and balances to make sure that everyone's not copying, or that things aren't being missed in the process and problems are being solved. And when I left to start my own creative practice, the primary reason I even wrote this strategy down was because I was getting so much pushback from clients on why I cost so much. I have never charged the average. I've always been above average in my pricing because I know the value of what I am providing. And it was more an answer to, okay, if you really want to know why I charge this much, I'm going to show you every step of what I actually do. I don't push a magic design button in Photoshop that gives you something that pops. And so that was sort of the genesis of me writing this down, but it's the way I've designed for a really long time. The iteration it's in now, like this final phase, has really been in place for about 10 years now, and I've been teaching it, whether at university or via workshops in my course and stuff like that, for probably the past 5 or 6 years. And so it wasn't a specific project, but I do actually use this. Like, this isn't just something I teach. This is something I use on every single project I do. To answer the other part of your question, my favorite projects lately have been personal projects. To design book covers is absolutely like where my, they do like the purpose, like what do you love and what are you good at, and it's like I love books and reading and I'm really great at design, and what happens in the middle is like book cover design. So I really love that. So I've been doing a lot of those, just redesigning covers for some of my own favorite books, just as a side project. I also really enjoy doing covers for musicians and podcast art. So like album art stuff is a big thing. And I love event poster design. That's another big one for me. So those are like my favorite things that I could design forever and never get sick of them. I do a lot of design strategy for brands, but I usually don't do the actual design anymore for stuff like that. If I do the design strategy, and then I work with designers to actually do the design part of that. That was a long answer.
No, that was a wonderful answer. One more question just on my end. You said that you've been teaching for about 5 or 6 years. How did you come into kind of teaching? Yeah, I guess, how did you come to teaching from being a creative strategist?
Again, a lot of these things, I have found that a lot of the positive things about what I do have come out of my answers to negative feelings that I have about other things. So I started my business in about 2012, and right around 2014-ish, I started feeling really frustrated with the fact that Fiverr was just coming around, and there was a lot of designers that I knew locally that were really charging super low rates, and it felt at the time, and I didn't realize then that I know now, that like their people were not my people and the whole target audience thing. But before I knew that and realized that in the freelance world, everyone has like their thing, I was just getting frustrated that in my mind, designers that were actually literally just ripping something off of the internet and recreating it and throwing another business name on it were getting more work than I was, and I was doing things right, and I knew what I was doing, and I was very experienced. And so I had all these negative feelings, and at some point I realized, you know what? I'm going to try and assume positive intent, and maybe they just don't know that's not okay. Like maybe they don't know you're not supposed to look on Google when your client says, I found this, can you just make this for me and put my name on it? And so I took a step back and started to think, maybe they just don't know what they don't know. And if I know, maybe I should actually help them, teach them, show them something so that they do know. And so I started blogging first in 2015. That was my first foray into sort of teaching, was here's some mistakes I see, here's some ways maybe, you should learn this thing or that thing. And then from there, I had a friend who said, these design tips that you do, the short ones, you should do that on YouTube. That would be awesome if you did that like live or something. And my husband's a video producer, and I was like, okay, like I could do that. That's not a big deal. It was a big deal. It's a lot of work, let me just tell you. But YouTube videos were like the next step in my learning and teaching people process. From there, I was asked to be an adjunct professor at my alma mater, the Southwest University of Visual Arts, which is now closed down thanks to the pandemic, unfortunately. But I was able to teach advanced design concepts to juniors and seniors there for about 3 or 4 years as just an extra instructor. And from there, I've been in the process of that. I've been teaching via my podcast. So I've been doing Design Speaks podcast since 2017. And now I created just this year my own course on the process that I launched in February. That it was like a huge labor of love, took me a year to do, and has been a long time coming. So it's been sort of like an incremental process of teaching. I hope that answers your question.
It certainly does. So in teaching at Southwest Visual Arts, did you have any interactions with students that were particularly rewarding that kind of pushed you forward to do things like creating your online course and things like that?
Yeah, I did. I was able to actually help multiple students do work that eventually earned them Addie Awards, which is like really rewarding for me. Not that I feel like that reward belongs to me in any way, but that I was able to give the tools to a designer that already had the skills to be able to have a way for them to achieve like one of the highest honors as a student designer, just gives me so much fulfillment that they were willing to learn this process, that they were willing to maybe, it was not easy all the time. There was a lot of pushback. A lot of these questions that I have in my presentation, like, okay, Brandi, but I know how to do that. And I already, like, that's from people who I have worked with, telling me these things literally, and getting over those humps of, okay, right, but that's your process. I have my process. And it really helped me hone in on like what designers need, what creatives need, and even more so that this isn't even just a something that early designers need. I've often found that this is something that can help mid career to farther along the way career designers even more, because that's when you're really stuck, because you've been doing it for a long time and you're like, I've got all the ideas done, like I'm over, I can't do this anymore, I've been doing it for 10 years, I don't have any more good ideas. And all the new designers are like, I have all the ideas, I just don't know how to make it. So it's really like such an amazing experience to be able to coach and guide designers through this process and help them really find their own creative voice, not just know how to use software and make a design.
Lovely. That was a great answer. Thank you. Let's see. I do have one question, just
Okay.
about, I guess, like the habit forming of this process. Like, it sounds to me like the kind of like the ways that you go about gathering inspiration and things like that are very, very much like a habit built into your daily life. How would you, do you have any recommendations for someone like trying to build that kind of habit? And what would be most helpful, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on a challenge that I'm not sure when will come out because it's almost summer and my kids are home. So we'll see how that goes. But baby steps of practicing awareness is and being the observer. So if you know that you are, and this works whether you're staying home like we have been for the past year, or hopefully now that people are getting vaccinated, getting out and doing things again, set small challenges up for yourself. So today, when I go out, I'm just going to look for the color red and take pictures or write down things that red makes you think of, and just do red that day. And set up small challenges. I'm just going to find circles. I'm only going to find, I'm going to see if I can find this word in the world or this letter. If you are working on a book or a story about a certain type of character and you're trying to figure through like, what would that person look like? Try and see if you can find those kinds of people in the world. And that might be a little creepy to take pictures of them, but you can definitely write down what they look like. Polka dots, stripes, like shadows, just pick a thing, one thing every time you go out and try and be aware. It's sort of, it's very much the idea, like when you're shopping for a car, if you want a blueberry colored VW Beetle, all of a sudden it's going to be like, holy cow, how come there's so many blueberry colored beetles out here? I didn't see that before. It's not that there are more. It's that you now have flipped a switch in your brain that has you looking for that thing. So then you can kind of add on. So if you want to find color palettes, then you can go, okay, I need color palettes in this category. And you can go out and try and find palettes if you were looking for patterns or locations, anything. Like you could be writing a film script and looking for locations. And this is what they do. It's like, okay, I need a film set that's like down an alley that has brick on one side and concrete on the other side. So then your brain has flipped that switch to that's what you are on the lookout for. So that's really what being awake and aware and observing is really the key to finding those personal inspiration things and then capturing them and keeping them for later. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. That was great. I will say thank you to Brandi for being our guest this morning.
Well, everyone can find me at Brandi Sea everywhere also. I'm the only Brandi Sea, social media, etc. It is just the one me.